This episode of the We Watch This Movie Podcast is sponsored by Shudder, Shudder.com. We have a 30-day free trial for you to try out using the promo code WWT. Okay? If you don't know what Shudder is, guys, it's the Netflix of horror, I call it. Okay? Amazing horror films, thriller films, supernatural content. Shudder is spooky 24/7, 365 days a year. Just because Halloween has come and gone doesn't mean the scares don't continue. Sign up to Shudder and get access to the largest collection of acclaimed horror movies and series streamed right to your favorite devices, whether it's your PlayStation, your Xbox, or your phone. Everywhere you can get it, guys. Shudder.com with the promo code WWT for a 30-day free trial. They support us, we support them. Now on to the show.
Welcome to the We Watch This Movie Podcast. This is episode number 38 and the final, spookiest, scariest part of our feature for Spooktober. What are you doing? And no, 8 releases into Spooktober.
Was that the Interstellar?
DJ Dan Allen Movies still has not got a clue, but he has got a new stream deck. And for you, our faithful listeners, rest assured, the cues, the laughs, the jokes, they'll still be coming, even if this week's episode might be our most frightening and introspective one yet. He is the connoisseur of all things Christopher Nolan. I am the lover of all things David Lynch. And today, with Dan Allen Movies, you've got Marshall on Film. We're going to be covering The Cleansing Hour. But before we do, Dan, what's been happening recently in the entertainment industry? Who have we tragically lost?
We lost Sean Connery a number of weeks ago from recording, which was a sad loss. He was 90 years of age and he had an incredible career. Obviously, a lot of people know him from the Bond films, and he was also in Indiana Jones, and he's an icon in Hollywood, so he'll be sorely missed. And what we're going to do this week is, because you got through Dan's Inferno...
Or did
final, well, we'll find out, but if you did get through it, we'll be recommending each other one Sean Connery film each, just to go back and witness this legend in action.
And look, it might be a rather dour note to begin this episode on, but now with that out of the way, we can get stuck into the creepies, the crawlies, the scaries, the chills. Dan, what is the cleansing hour?
The cleansing hour is when I cleanse this guy on Instagram. Okay? He called me out last week. I mentioned it on I believe it was our live episode. He called me out on Instagram and he called me pathetic. What was his words, Jackson? I had the taste of a 12-year-old, okay?
You had the taste of a 12-year-old. This podcast is hosted by a true cinephile and someone with the tastes of a 12-year-old.
His name is Muckman_movies, Jamie, okay? And I called him out for being an A24 fanboy, which he is. Disgusting fanboy, okay? You know, a bit like the mermaid scene. Just disgusting. Anyway.
Get those bingo cards out, folks.
He called me out and I called him back out, and now he's come back to me again, and he loves the banter. Well, I don't love the banter, mate, okay? You listen to me here. You're an A24 fanboy, and I need you to go home, get your Kleenex, and watch Lighthouse over and over with a bag of chippies and enjoy yourself, okay? Because that's all you're going to do, mate. A24, disgusting. Anyway, Jackson, The Cleansing Hour, the actual movie. We found it on Shudder, just released recently, I believe, for Halloween.
Shudder.
And we actually got to interview the director as well, which is going to be in this episode. We got 30 minutes with him, and he was a blast to talk to, and we got some great insights, didn't we?
Absolutely. We can't wait to share this exclusive interview with Damien LeVeck with you, our faithful listeners, and the rest of the world. And by the way, Jamie, don't take Dan's words to heart, because I'll be seeing you on the show, my new co-host for episode number 39. Look, enough beating around the bush. Our horror listeners, our gore whores who are out there, they've come here for one reason. They've come for the cleansing hour. Hit the cue.
In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, I command you to give me your name.
That trailer is actually pretty well cut. I wonder if Damien did that himself as well.
Geez, that would have been a good question to ask him. If only we had the chance to do an interview. Reverend Max and his best friend Drew make a substantial living off of their live stream web series, The Cleansing Hour, where Max performs fake exorcisms every episode. Their hundreds of thousands of fans, however, aren't aware that Max isn't a legitimate exorcist, nor is there any truth to the show. That is until Drew's fiancée Lane has to step in to perform on the stream when their victim of the week goes missing. True evil converges on set for the first time, and poor Lane becomes possessed. The demon is hell-bent on terrorizing the cast and crew, as well as exposing their darkest, most fraudulent secrets in front of a rapidly growing legion of bloodthirsty fans. Dan, would you have been a subscriber to the Cleansing Hour if this kind of thing was happening today?
I don't think I'd be a subscriber. I think I'd be on the set. I think I'd be Father Joe. That was his name? Have I got that right?
Reverend Max?
I've stuffed up another. Jesus, look. Have I ever got a protagonist name right? Seriously. What did your mate say after listening to our review on the platform? He said, "This is what you told me." He said, "Did he even watch the movie?" Oh no! Anyway.
I'm not going to hold it against you. You do a lot of good work here at the show. It's such a shame that none of it makes air.
Anyway, no. Look. This movie I was recommended to by Tommy Lucas, who we all know. He's a long lost episode.
All do?
Well, look, you and me do. When I say we, it's you and me right now. You're talking. Oh, I've lost the plot today. Anyway, Tommy Lucas, one of the greatest composers in the world, said, "Dan, I want you to watch this film." He hadn't even seen it. And he just liked the concept. So I told Jackson, I'm like, let's check this out on Shudder. It's got a cool concept. And what the concept is just a streaming exorcism. And it's never been done. And I had a good time. Not a great time, but I had a good time with this. What about you?
You sure do love your possession movies, your exorcism movies. I think you might have called it The Exorcism of Emily Jane or maybe Mary Jane one time, which sounds like it could be the next Spider-Man movie coming out. What was the other movies you said you love? The Conjuring, right?
Yeah, I love possession films. And he touched on one thing in the interview where Alex's performance in this was he said it was one of the top 5 possession performances he'd ever seen, and I tend to agree with him because she was phenomenal in this film. Really was. Like, it was like two different people.
Oh, 100%. I'm gonna agree with yourself as well as Damien, Dan, that Alex Angelis brought another level and just brought a different game and raised everyone's act throughout the picture. So kudos to her. For our listeners who might be on the fence about checking this out, maybe they like their horror flicks nice and gory with a lot of kills, but aren't a fan of the demon possession genre. There's everything in this movie. It's kind of like everything, including the kitchen sink concept, right? Because I feel like we hit every single cliche on the head, but that's not so bad when it's an hour and a half. Just throw everything at the fucking wall.
Yeah, he really did. And I had to laugh at one of the kills that happened with the, let's call her an intern, and she was sort of hanging around the whole time, and she thought she knew everything, and the way she went out was so funny. Like, I found the movie quite funny. I don't know if I was supposed to, but I know you did as well, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. There are some pretty decent laugh out loud moments here. Nothing that's going to send you rolling and laughing on the floor,
No,
and
but
nothing as
just
charming as One Cut of the Dead, for example.
no.
But considering that it's trying to hit you on so many different fronts, it's attempting to terrify you, to keep things tense on the edge of your seat, and then still bring in some cathartic laughs. It's quite a big juggling act to play. And as we listen to our interview coming up here in a moment with Damien, he'll speak a little bit about his editing background, and it must have been one hell of an edit to actually get this right, because there's so many concepts and so many crazy stuff at play. I mean, despite being an exorcism live streaming movie, well, then there's also a fairly deep and in-depth. Wow, that's very insightful, isn't it? It's it does go in between the relationship between our two leads, Max and Drew, and in fact, it gives us a heck of a lot more than I'd ever expect between the two. What were your thoughts on how that dynamic played out, which we might go into in spoiler territory?
You're right when you say it hit all the cliches. By the end, the dynamic between the three of them and some of the things that come out is like, oh my God, really? Yeah. Yeah.
It was pretty preposterous to begin with, but now we're at a whole other level. Like, okay, you want to live stream an exorcism? Sure, go for it. Be my guest.
All of them were believable though. Like, I felt sorry for him though when he had to get his gear off, that's for sure. That would not have been a fun time to shoot. But you know what? What I'll say again, with going back to the comedy factor, does that just mean we're sick in the head? That we're laughing at some of this stuff? Or was it genuinely made when he was in the editing room, he's thinking, yeah, he's playing on that comedy factor of it?
Damien's playing up the humor 100%. Consider
so
all
we're not crazy.
We're not crazy. We do love getting depraved, and we're not people in the mental health field, so we still very likely could be crazy. But go back, rewatch the film a second or a third time. It's not very long, so hey, why not? You could watch a heck of a lot worse movies out there right now. Take a look at all the trolling comments on the live stream from listeners around the world globally, or viewers, I should say, because there's some pretty disgusting and vile things in there. I said it in the synopsis: bloodthirsty fans. They were pretty full on. They're encouraging Reverend Max to get his kid off, to cut himself. Just really sick stuff that's going to get your skin crawling. We're talking a lot about what we like, and again, we'll go into more in spoiler territory and what we didn't, but Dan, you said it was a good time, not a great time. What can you elaborate on that for our listeners before the interview here with Damien?
It's tough for horrors in 2020. That there's an original idea here, but there's a very small budget, and we know he didn't have much to work with. And it's not so much the cast or even the idea. It's probably something in the script there that's missing to take it to the next level. And it's inherently it's a B-grade horror inherently, so it's never going to reach those high levels, and Damien would admit that himself. He's trying to prove himself as a director, and he wants to do big action blockbuster films. So this is the way some people have to get there. I completely understand it, and making a name for himself in the horror genre is what a lot of directors do. You think of James Wan and Lee Winnell, a couple of Aussie guys that made their way doing that exact thing. So I feel like it's an easy way to get their name out. But what I didn't love about the film was probably 40, 50 minutes in there. It started to, not drag on, but lost its pacing a little bit when he had.
When he had to start to wane.
When he had to get his gear off, it went a little bit too far for me. And even her having the voice of that demon or devil, after a while, it's not actually creepy to me. It was more funny than creepy, for one. And a lot of this film for me was more funny than creepy. I didn't actually get scared once, really, but I am very desensitized to this stuff. So let's take that with a grain of salt. But The storyline with I believe it's a sound guy, that was a little bit. It didn't do anything for me either.
Yeah, it was pretty hokey.
It was pretty hokey. I was more interested in the Reverend and what was going to happen to him and where that was going. And then when it went a little bit too far with the love triangle and all that, I understand it needed some twists and turns. I don't know if that was the right one, but I like the ambition here. I like the ballsiness. It's a different film, and it was pretty entertaining for the most part.
I'm gonna agree. It was super entertaining. Was the big final third act turn into the denouement, was that really required? Was that maybe just a bridge too far? Very likely, yes. I'm going to disagree with you, Dan. I liked the love triangle. I certainly didn't see that coming. I enjoyed that these stereotypes were explored and uncovered, and they did feel like fully fleshed out people by the end of the movie, especially, well, I'm pointing mainly towards Max and Drew, and we found out their Roman Catholic backstory, which Damien himself had a Roman Catholic upbringing, so it's hardly surprising to see him explore some of those themes and maybe even some frightening stuff and trauma that he experienced as a child. That stuff worked quite well, but to then balance that with some of the jokes and some of the memes that the Lane Demon was cracking, tonally, it just wasn't super consistent, and it was a little jarring. It would kind of jolt you out of your seat at times, going, "Oh, that's right, I'm just watching a movie. I wonder what the next kill's gonna be. I wonder what's gonna happen to these characters next."
The tone.
If you're someone, yeah, if you are a gore whore and you love this stuff, you'll look past it. If you're a casual moviegoer, you really will only watch one horror film every year, if that, because you don't like getting scared. You won't even really pick up on it. But for someone who enjoys movies, not even necessarily will listen to this podcast, or we hope you do, or would discuss them as in depth and as much as we would, you still will pick up on it and go, geez, this doesn't quite sit right. I just wish there was just some, I just wish it was we just kind of went down one consistent path. However, it is still fresh enough to be considered a decent take on what is otherwise a pretty beaten down genre in the demon or possession genre. No matter whatever kind of original material you try to inject and energy and flavor, it's always going to be compared to something like The Exorcist.
With horror,
far from the first I've seen, the worst, I should say.
The horror fans on Shudder are really loving this film. It's got really high praise all through the reviews and their rating system on Shudder.
I believe it's got 5 skulls.
That's pretty high. That's 5 out of 5, right?
That's 5 out of 5.
It's really, the horror fans and fanatics are loving the film. Why do you think that is compared to other horrors?
I believe that if you're a gore whore, this hits every beat you want it to. You've got lots of cool practical effects. It's violent. It doesn't shy away from showing any of them. And it does give you some strong tongue-in-cheek humor, even if all the jokes don't necessarily land. Plus, Dan, you mentioned the A word, ambition. If nothing, this is an ambitious film. And we have to praise Damien for doing that.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to seeing what he does next. Should we get into the interview with Damien?
Let's do it, Dan. Before that happens, can we get a spoiler alert for our listeners who haven't watched this just yet? Because go check it out.
Well, we'll kick off, mate. We said we really enjoyed the movie. I just want to know straight off the bat how you've been during COVID in 2020 and how's things down there in LA?
Thanks. That's a sweet question. I've been really well. I have 3 kids under 4. So between that and work, I've just been extremely busy, and I just don't have time to think about COVID, to be quite honest with you. Fortunately, everybody's been very healthy in my family, and this has been an exceptionally good year for me for work, and I released the movie, and my company has been doing really well. So it's bittersweet knowing that there are so many people out there who are not doing so well. But I think it's been partially due to the fact that I've been busy and preoccupied with other things. How are you guys?
We're good. We just got out of lockdown here in Melbourne. We'd been in lockdown, really stage 3 restrictions, so we couldn't even go 5 kilometers out of our out of our houses. So we were really locked down. But finally,
Yeah.
just last week, we've been let loose and cinemas are opening tomorrow. So things are starting to get back to normal here as well.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah. So this concept started from a crowd-funded short film. Is that right?
Yeah, I made in 2016. I released a short film by the same name that was mostly crowdfunded, and I made it as a proof of concept for the feature film.
I thought so. It makes sense. How did Shudder come about recently? How did that relationship come about? Because it's just a perfect platform, and we're sponsored by them as here at the podcast, and we've just loved the service, and we've found movies like yours and Host and a bunch of others that have just come out of nowhere and really taken the horror fans by storm.
Yeah, well, Shudder was, I suppose they got involved pretty early on in the process of making the feature. We had a sales company on board who had mentioned it to them. They expressed a lot of interest from the script stage. They actually wanted to see the movie in early cut of it, but I wouldn't let them. I said, no, you gotta wait till it's done. But they loved it, and they were big fans, and that's I think that we found the best home for it.
Oh, exactly.
Well done. And hasn't 2020 been the perfect year to have a movie debut on a streaming service too?
Yeah, it really has. It's funny, because the movie has been done for quite some time, and it basically had to wait a year for it to be released, and or at least in North America. It was released in other countries before this, but North America and Australia.
Yeah.
But it's funny because they were like, "Oh, well, we were thinking Halloween next year," and I was like, "Oh, Halloween, great, but that's next year." And so I swallowed that bitter pill, and then COVID hit, and then Shudder subscribers hit 1 million in September, and
wow.
I couldn't have. It was just serendipitous. I couldn't have asked for better timing because more people saw the Cleansing Hour and were exposed to the Cleansing Hour because of the timing of it and COVID and everything than ever would have seen it had they released it on my timetable. So it worked out for the best. It seems people seem to like it.
That's fantastic, and congratulations again, Damien, because I'm sure that you've had quite a bit of groundswell, and as our listeners will have heard at the top of this interview, you mentioned that you've got a pitch coming up very soon. So don't worry, we'll try and press you and pry for some information. Damien, I want to ask, what was your experience about having your first ever feature film that you've directed released at Fantastic Fest? That must have been pretty surreal, given your extensive background in TV and editing. We're pretty jealous. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's pretty exciting So let me back up to the short film. The short film went to a bunch of festivals and it won a bunch of awards. One of the festivals that I went to was Sitges in Spain, and it's a pretty world-renowned genre film festival, and that was very cool. And I remember talking with Angel at Sitges back in 2016, and he said that, hey, if you ever make the feature film, please come back. So we did, and we premiered in the US at Fantastic Fest, and then we went to Spain a couple weeks later and did our European premiere there. And that was about the coolest thing ever, because it's the two of the world's best genre film festivals to have your movie at, and we were there. It was great.
That's awesome. I want to ask a little bit about that crowdfunding and the pre-production. So I'm glad that you touched on it, Damien. Here at the We Watch This Movie podcast, we love shining a light on a lot of these director-driven movies, particularly those that might be considered like a passion project or a labor of love. Obviously, in your case, in the nicest sense possible, we hope that you weren't dragging anyone kicking and screaming into the production, and we hope that you weren't like a megalomaniac on set. What can you tell our listeners about some interesting facts for the crowdfunding or for the pre-production? Because it's gone here from crowdfunding to short film and now into feature. There must have been some interesting stuff there along the way.
Well, there are two different animals. There's the crowdfunding aspect of it, which is what we did on the short film, and then there was just sort of cobbling together the money to make the feature. And the Cleansing Hour, every movie is different, so every movie is going to have a different financial structure. For those that are listening who don't know about financing movies, the financial structure is basically, where does the money come from? What are the pieces? Equity is cash. debt is borrowed money. There's soft money that it comes from tax credits and tax rebates and that sort of thing. There are bridge loans and completion loans and all that sort of thing. So you have to sort of factor that in. Also back end deals. You have to deferrals. All this sort of stuff factors into how much a movie costs and how do you make your money back on that. This was the first movie that my company produced as well. So there was a learning process along the way. But, for anybody that's looking to get into it, I would suggest reading as much as possible. I would suggest calling up sales companies and try and develop relationships with them. And then also attend film markets and have a sense for, what are people buying? And because, if you're not going the studio route, you have to rely on international sales companies to make your movie, or at least to sell your movie for you. And there are a lot out there, and there is an entire market, just for independent films around the world. So you can self-educate for sure to do it.
Can I ask,
does that answer your question?
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, go for it.
Can I ask, do you think this film would have been made if you weren't in LA?
Do I think it would have been made? Yeah.
Yeah. Is it a harder beast outside of LA, do you think?
Just knowing what I went through to get the money together and everything, I don't necessarily think that it would have made a difference had I been someplace else, because I spent all my time on the phone. So that's how I did everything. I mean, a lot of the companies that I reached out to who actually had nothing to do with the movie were based in LA. I was trying to partner up with somebody else to, mitigate my risk. But, I think that it does, sort of superficially lend a little bit of legitimacy to you if you're an LA-based company. But I don't know that it matters all that much. I mean, we filmed the movie in Romania. We did shoot 2 days. Yeah, we shot 2 days in LA. But I don't think it makes too much of a difference.
I
do think there are benefits to being in LA for other reasons, and I actually just had an interview earlier today where we talked about that, or I'm sorry, yesterday. But a part of that is just like the talent pool in LA is so vast that you have access to great artists for all departments for making a movie. So you'll never have a trouble finding a good grip or a good DP or something, because there are so many talented people out there. And in the music industry too. So that you have like audio post and music, and it's all here in LA. So for finishing a movie, being in LA is very helpful.
I want to ask about the ending, how it came about, and the CGI in particular there with the devil, the demon, whatever you want to call it. Talk to me about that ending.
Well, first of all, I have to correct this for the record. That is not CGI. That is a practical creature.
Really? There you go.
Yeah. That is a 95% practical creature. The only thing that we did CG on it was the eyes. And we added a little bit of heat distortion coming out of the mouth. So the joke's on you, and I feel really happy that you made that mistake, because that just means that the practical effects were that awesome. That creature was designed by Amalgamated Dynamics, Academy Award nominated practical effects company, and I'm actually meeting with them next week to talk about this next movie I'm doing.
Ooh.
It's going to be a creature film with entirely 100% practical, not CG, 100%. Anyway, it was a practical creature. What else can I tell you about it? The ending.
What was your did you have a definitive ending, like after the credits roll? What happens? Does it all go to shit?
Yeah, that was always the intention. And I always wanted, I love man on end title sequences. So I thought, what better way to show the mayhem going on around the world than to do it while the credits are rolling. It just seemed like the appropriate way of doing it. It's much lower cost to do that too. So, and I thought it was pretty cool title design with, showing the breakdown of the imagery and everything like that, all the little emojis and everything.
Yeah, no, that was very cool. I want to ask, what was the experience like with working with Tom Woodruff Jr.'s company that you mentioned, Damien, amalgamated dynamics, because there's a lot of practical effects in this movie, and just like Dan brought up, some of them look CGI. It must have been pretty wild to kind of coordinate and get this all done on set, be it in LA or Romania. What can you tell our listeners about that experience?
Well, first of all, Tom and Alec are awesome dudes. They've been doing this for a really long time. So in so many ways, I just kind of defer to them on like the best way of accomplishing something, because they've seen it all and they've worked on really, really big movies. And the other thing is, like, they're just really sweet people too. They're like really big kids at heart. So it's fun to get in a room with them and just be creative people. And, there's no pretension or anything like that. It's just, we're here to make a movie and we're doing what we love. So that's really the best part about that. There were certainly challenges with, all the effects being made in LA and then having to ship them to Romania. That's always a thing. The next movie I might be doing in Ireland, so that should be a little bit easier to get things in and out. But the process was really great. It was really lovely because they're so creative and so talented, and they've got such a great team of people there who love what they do, and it was fairly seamless.
Okay, that's really cool.
I will say, there is some CG in the movie, and like the little imp that you have behind you there. That was supposed to be that was going to be a practical effect. I wanted it to be a practical effect, and we were talking about possibly shooting it with forced perspective, a combination of forced perspective and green screen. And I was going to have ADI make these imps, and it just, for cost and time reasons, it just didn't work out that way. But the flip side of that and the upside of that was that I was able to get this imp that I designed, and I really wanted to, I really wanted to make this monster the way that it turned out in the movie. So, I got the best of, I got what I wanted, I guess.
For our listeners out there, what is forced perspective?
It's the idea of taking, it's making objects look larger or smaller in the frame based on how near or far they are from the camera. So, there's a lot of really, this is, Chaplin and Buster Keaton did a lot of this in early filmmaking, where, they would make themselves look like that, they're really big or they're really small, or a lot of times, Chaplin's hanging from a clock, and it looks like he's about ready to fall off a building because it looks like he's really high off the ground. Well, that's just a matte painting. That's just a matte painting that's, just right behind the set, that makes it look like he's actually high up in the air. Or the idea that we were referencing for the forced perspective doing the imps was, if you've seen the movie The Gate, which is, have you guys seen The Gate?
I don't believe I have, actually.
I'm drawing a blank, but it's ringing a bell. Take us through it.
You should see it. It's really great. It's like 1987 or something. And they do this amazing effect where they've got these little dudes, like people, like they shot at full-size people in little monster suits, and they've got a camera in a bedroom, and they've got these little guys. They're supposed to look like they're only like 2 feet tall, and they've got full-size actors standing against a wall, and these little men crawl out of this dead guy's body. Okay. Well, they didn't have CG back then, so how do you do it? Well, if you've got full-size people, you have to put them down further in the stage, and when the camera's up here, so that they look smaller. So what they did was they have a locked off camera, and it's aiming across the room, and the floor looks like it's at a normal height, but when in fact it's actually 20 feet lower to make the little people who are in suits look small. And it's a seamless effect. It is bonkers, and it works so well. So what I wanted to do with the little imps was do that similar thing, put the camera further back, and then comp them into the scene, using traditional, computers.
Green screen, yeah.
Yeah, but we just didn't have the time to shoot it. It's a time thing. Like, practical effects is very time consuming. So that's mainly the reason why.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the example, Damien. You know what sprung to mind as you were taking us through it? First of all, I had Lord of the Rings, when we have all those scenes between Ian McKellen as Gandalf and then the
That's
hobbits.
perspective.
Yeah. And then another one, that's a bit boring. This came to mind. can you remember in Army of Darkness, the Evil Dead Sam Raimi movie, where they
Mm-hmm.
have Ash, and he has all the little Ashes come out of the evil Ash's dead body, and then they're all running around on the floor.
Yes.
Yeah, that's another one. And I thought, geez, that sounds exactly the same. No, that's really cool. We
Well,
want
in
to
fact,
ask,
Lord,
yeah?
Lord of the Rings had the same visual effects supervisor who did the forced perspective, and I'm trying to remember his name. But I'm same guy as The Gate, the movie that
Okay,
Oh,
we've
there
wow.
you
seen.
go.
Yeah. So he actually is kind of like the master of this. What is his name? Thomas something. I'll get it
Please,
for
we're
you.
gonna have to check out his work. Go for
Yeah,
it.
I'll find it. But go ahead. You keep talking.
Awesome.
You mentioned.
We've
So you go ahead, Jackson. Go ahead.
no, please, Dan, all yours.
Oh, Randall
All
William
yours.
Cook. That's what I think. That's Randall
Awesome.
William Cook. Yeah.
Thanks, Damien.
You mentioned creature feature for your next film. What can you give us?
Sure. It's a Christmas horror. Takes place during a blizzard, and it's about a mom who keeps her daughter shut up in a methadone-induced fever, locked behind a cage in her bedroom, because she thinks that if she breaks this fever, this creature appears. And these two kids break in looking for shelter, and they are in for a surprise when they find out that mom and daughter have a highly dysfunctional relationship, and there is a monster in the house.
Ooh, what's the inspiration for this monster? Any clues?
Um, I guess I would say it looks like a humanoid porcupine from hell. It's truly unique. You've never seen anything like this before in your life. It
Wow.
is a truly grotesque, awesome, gorgeous monster.
That sounds amazing. And all practical,
It's
you
gonna be
reckon?
great. It's going to be 100% practical. There's not going to
Wow.
be any CG on this monster.
So go again with creature features. What are some of your favorites?
I'm really, really in love with movies like Critters, Gremlins, The Thing, Alien, Starship Troopers.
Yep.
What are some other ones that I
The
I
same as
really
us,
love?
pretty much.
And
Yeah,
anything
I mean-
anything where the creature blows up, right?
Oh, of course.
Because if you're gonna have it, you're gonna blow it up.
I actually think that Gremlins 2 has some of the most amazing practical effects and creature puppetry I've ever seen. It is
Yeah,
some of the absolute best. It's phenomenal.
it really is.
Yeah.
I agree.
Oh, totally underrated, especially when compared to the first film. We've been talking a lot
Yeah.
here about effects, Damien. I want to ask about some of these crazy performances and the casting process behind them. So for the cleansing hour, both Ryan and Kyle do some really good work as the leads, and I'm sure you've heard this in other interviews, Alex is really the standout here playing Lane. We want to hear how much of her performance was on the page and what did she bring? Because that must have been pretty wild directing her in a lot of those sequences.
Well, I mean, the words on the page are on the page, but whenever you give it to a good actor, they're always going to give it that third dimension. And the process of casting Alex for Lane was quite arduous. We auditioned some fairly prolific actresses for it, and it wasn't clicking for me. So we did an open call, and my casting director, God bless her, had over 3,000 submissions that she had to sift through.
Wow.
Oh my God.
And she sent me the best ones. And as soon as I saw Alex's, I was like, that's it. Like, it was like she was in my head when I wrote it. And she was just so creepy. I showed it to my wife and she got chills. This is just her casting tape. Okay. And so, Alex and I did some work together so that she had a good idea of, I really guided her a lot to sort of figure out what's the difference between possessed Lane and normal Lane, because she had to go back and forth a lot. And she was also seated in a chair most of the time too. So it was a very physical performance in that way. So once we had sort of worked out the mechanics of what that is, then she could really let herself go and sink into the role and do her brilliant thing. And she did. And I say this with the utmost humility, but I truly do believe it, that I think that Alex Angelis is truly, her performance in The Cleansing Hour has got to be one of the top 5 possession performances that I have ever seen. Okay, and I've seen a lot of exorcism movies.
Yeah, she was phenomenal. I want to know though, when you're on set and she's doing some of these demonic faces and screams and talking or miming, when you say cut, is there a laughter on set? What's it like?
The funny thing is like Alex is the exact opposite of the person she's playing in the movie.
Yeah.
So she'll be screaming and doing some demonic thing, and all of a sudden there'll be a cut, and she's like, oh, like soft spoken, and she'll look at you and she's like, so how was that? Is that, you know? That's super quiet and just chill. But it was great. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. You know, the funny thing, there was this one. The day that we were doing the vomiting, she's throwing up the black bile. You know, we had this appliance on her face that, you know, spit stuff out of her mouth. So like it would literally fill up her mouth with the stuff, and then she could, you know, hurl it or do whatever she wanted, or we could spray it. You know, so we're filming, and I just keep rolling and I'm directing her off camera while we're rolling. And after we did this like take, it was like 10 or 15 minutes long, super long take. And after we were done, Natalie, my wife, who produced it with me, she's like, yeah, we were all standing at the monitor, and we were like, should we go tell him to cut, because like this is really brutal to watch. I mean, she just looks terrible. She looks like she's in pain. Like, you know, we were concerned you were torturing her, and I'm glad they didn't too, because I edited the movie too, and I've been editing for almost 20 years. I knew exactly what I knew. Yeah, I knew exactly how much of that footage I needed. I need to keep going. We needed more. Because there's a lot of things like we didn't. Yeah, even that you film for 10 minutes, but you don't use 10 minutes because like the focus goes soft for whatever reason. Like there's a bit there that you know you're not going to use. So I just had to keep going. And Alex was a trooper. She's so good at that. She did the vomiting and the heaving and the rag being pulled out of her mouth and everything. Practically, we didn't have to fake it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damien, we want to hear about that editing process. This sounds like it must have been a huge juggling act for you. We're certain that you've got many years of experience, but to hear that you've produced it, you've directed it, you wrote it, and you edited it, how hard was it to kind of keep that consistent tone throughout production with all the excessive violence that you mentioned, a lot of the social media commentary that went into this picture, plus how you must have been feeling after some of these shoots and then during the production? What were you doing to kind of keep things consistent?
I think that because I had done so much work ahead of time preparing, knowing moment by moment in the movie in my mind what this is supposed to be and playing it out in my mind. You know, the editor in me is seeing the shots and seeing how they cut together and making sure that whatever I do on set, the way that I film it, is going to match up with what I've preconceived. As much as humanly possible. So that's mainly how I did it. You know, if something wasn't working, it was by that point, by the time you're on set, by the time the cameras are rolling, it's instinctual. It's like, okay, this isn't working. We got to fix it. And then in the editing room, I don't know. I don't know how else to say it. It's kind of second nature. I edit and I just do it, and I just know how to pull it off, and it just works. I don't mean to sound snooty.
It's just second nature, isn't it?
Not arrogant at all.
It is kind of second nature. I edit. That's what I do.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. Can I ask? I don't know if this is a question you've been asked before, but yeah, it is a relatively small budget, this film. If you had, let's say, 10 times the budget, what would you have done differently?
Well, I mean, if I had 2 or 3 times the budget, I can tell you what I would do differently. I mean, I would first of all give myself more shooting days.
Yeah.
We shot the bulk of the movie, which is pretty much everything minus 2 of the spectator scenes. 1, 2, 3. 3 of the spectator scenes were shot in 19 days. I would have loved to have had 25 days to shoot all of that. And in doing so, I would have shot more coverage. I would have shot more of what I wanted, coverage wise. And that also just to give myself more options in editing. I mean, like,
Yeah.
yes, like as editor, I shoot only what I'm going to use. But had I had more time, I could have covered the entire scene differently, and I, you know, it could have felt like a bigger movie for that reason. I also probably would have shot it in the U.S. to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But you know, with the budget that we had, shooting in Romania was the only option.
Is there a reason for US over Romania? Just because you know the US better, or
Oh, just because, yeah. I
talent
mean,
pool?
first of all, it's at home, and
Yeah.
you know, it's close to home, and then you know, the talent pool is. I mean, nothing against Romania. I would totally shoot there again.
Yeah.
But you know, just being quite honest, LA and Canadian crews are some of the best in the world. So being closer to that would be very helpful. If shooting in LA is very expensive, but if I had that ability, yeah, we almost shot in Kentucky. If I had shot in Kentucky, I still would have been more comfortable, just because, like, also there's no language barrier, and you know, you're at least in the States, and there's no, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Damien, we want to ask, what's some advice you have for young aspiring filmmakers who might be listening to this podcast right now, and maybe advice for yourself at the tender age of 25?
I would say if you want to be a writer director, then you need to practice writing as much as possible. Don't stop doing that. Practice your craft by making short films. Take advantage of your 20s when you have friends who have the time and wherewithal to help you out for free on the weekends or weeknights or whenever it might be. You know, I'm 38 now. I don't have that luxury really anymore. I have to pay people if I want to get them to come out. So practice your craft, and then, you know, if you want to make feature films, keep writing features at the same time. And you need to learn the business. I think that living in a place like LA is helpful, because you can work at post companies, you can work at production companies, you can learn about development, you can learn about how movies and TV are finished. You should learn as much about the process in all different departments as possible. And then finally, have a really good work ethic and attitude, because if you aren't lazy and you are positive and friendly and fun to work with, you already have a leg up on 85% of the people in town.
Really?
And everyone's going to want to work with you, and you're never going to have a problem finding a job again, because they're going to remember how pleasant you were.
Is there really a lot of people that are you know, not very energetic, very down?
It's not that they're down. It's just that they're all talk. They're lazy, and they don't really follow through.
Right.
And yeah, people have a bad work ethic. A lot of times they are entitled. They think that they're better than, you know, being the PA who has to go get everyone in the office coffee, and you know, they have it's just really sour grapes all the time. Like, that's just not the attitude.
Yeah.
You need to be friends with everybody, because those people that you are with, you never know where they're going to be working. You really don't. And I'll tell you, if there's one industry where you can fail upward, it's entertainment. So that person that you work with, who you might hate, could be signing your check one day.
Yeah, we love it. Thank you. That's an awesome bit of advice. I'm sure there's going to be a few listeners out there who have taken something away. So thank you, Damien. One of our last questions here for the interview. Dan wants us to challenge every guest to this. So you're in the hot seat for this question, and Dan knows what's coming next. We're probably going to have a bit of a laugh when we ask it. I'm going to give you two names, and you're going to tell us which you prefer and why. So here goes. Christopher Nolan or David Lynch?
Okay. Well,
everyone gives the same response. Everyone goes, "Oh goodness."
all right. I'm going to say Christopher Nolan, and here's why.
Yeah.
I do like David Lynch in his movies, but we're talking about apples and oranges here. So
absolutely,
I'm gonna say Christopher Nolan, because I want to be Christopher Nolan.
Everyone has the same response.
Yeah. I want to be Christopher Nolan. You know, I love horror movies. I've got a bunch more that I need to make. But the truth is that I want to make Nolan-sized movies. That is definitely something that is an aspiration for me. I'm not happy making small independent films for the rest of my life. So, you know, God willing, I will one day be making $200 million studio features. And Christopher Nolan is a brilliant filmmaker, a brilliant writer. He's a mensch. Everyone loves him. and he's an example for me. He's also, his wife is his producer, which I also admire because my wife is a producer, and awesome. He's an example to me in every way, and that's why.
Great.
We love
great
it. Thank
answer.
you.
That's the answer I was looking for. Well, thanks for joining us, Damien. I really appreciate your time, and we'll definitely have you back for once the next feature's out.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Please, you guys can hit me up anytime. I'm glad you did, and we should talk some more whenever you want to talk.
Absolutely. Before we go, what have you been watching recently? What can you recommend that our listeners check out or maybe avoid if it wasn't what you thought it was?
If you have Shudder, watch Daniel Isn't Real. It's really phenomenal. Adam Agent Mortimer, I believe, is the director, and it stars.
Wait, is that Patrick Schwarzenegger?
Yes, Patrick Schwarzenegger.
Yes.
Wow.
And it's Tim Robbins' son. Anyway, the performances are terrific. It's exceptionally well directed. Great script. Just beautiful movie. I love the score. Everything. It was great. Daniel Isn't Real is a winner.
Wow. Okay. I think that might be our next review, Jackson.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
we'll check
Damien.
out Daniel Isn't Real on Shudder.
Thanks, Damien. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon, mate. Have a good night.
You are welcome, gentlemen. Have a good one.
As the world's premier streaming service for horror, thriller, and supernatural content, Shudder is spooky 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Just because Halloween is coming past doesn't mean that the scares don't continue. Sign up for Shudder and get access to the largest collection of acclaimed horror movies and series streamed right to your favorite devices. $5.99 a month, $56.99 for the year. It truly is the Netflix for horror. For you, our faithful listeners of the We Watch This Movie podcast, you want to head to shudder.com. You want to use promo code WWT to get your 30-day free trial. That's 30 days on us. It's on screen. Promo code WWT for your 30-day free trial. Are you wondering what's on Shudder? Well, how about almost every movie we covered in Spooktober? It follows The Cleansing Hour, One Cut of the Dead, and another movie that I can't quite remember that I'm sure Dan is going to remind me of after this ad read. It indeed was Host. Thank you so much. Personally, I want to recommend our listeners go out and check out Leap of Faith, William Friedkin on The Exorcist. That's the original director of The Exorcist. William Friedkin has his own documentary coming out in several weeks. Get started streaming the best horror, thriller, and supernatural content. Shudder's expertly curated collection includes Tigers Are Not Afraid, One Cut of the Dead, Revenge, the Creepshow TV series produced by Greg Nicotero based on the famous films by George Romero. Try it for free, one more time, 30 days, shudder.com, promo code WWT.
So, great interview with Damien there. Hope you guys got a bit of insight. We thank him again for his time, and we'll definitely have him on for his next creature feature, where he gave us a little teaser there. I love a good creature feature, Jackson. Love it.
Oh, tell me about it. What was the next creature feature you're excited for? There might even be one. Isn't it Robert Eggers' new movie?
Robert Eggers' new movie?
Yeah, The Northman.
Is that a creature feature?
Oh, knowing him, it's got to have some weird, spooky horror stuff going on.
I sent you the article. Was it Nicole Kidman? That's like, I'm terrified of this script or something. Oh, it sounds pretty good. Anyway,
that's what we want going in.
Anyway, so Jackson, we're in spoiler territory now. What was your thoughts on that ending in The Cleansing Hour?
We mentioned how 50 minutes in, the movie starts to run out of steam. I was actually still engrossed enough. I felt that after we had that reveal of the love triangle between Lane, Max, and Drew, which I felt was handled well enough. I didn't see it coming. It was surprising, and it was a little jaw-dropping. To then have the devil, and then the entire plan, the entire deal with taking over Lane was to spread the devil's message throughout the world. Everybody starts killing each other. I understand why Damien did it. And if we go back and watch his short film, he wanted to make sure it had a different ending, but it just felt like too much. Like, this was too preposterous. Sure, it's a real live streamed exorcism, but it was just too much. You know, I kind of checked out. What did you think?
I was shocked when we saw the demon appear. I'm like,
wow. By the way, a point on that demon. You mentioned in the episode that we thought it was CGI. Did this thing look like Steppenwolf from Justice League to you?
It did a little bit, didn't it? But
I had to
it
chuckle.
looked better than Steppenwolf, so I'll give him that. Look, I can't wait to see the new Steppenwolf, hey? In that beautiful film that you're yet to see. Anyway, look, the ending. So when the demon appeared, my initial thoughts are this is a little bit, over the top, a little bit cheesy. But then I said, does it fit into this world? Probably. From what they'd led up to that, we had the stuff on that guy's face throughout it. We had different creatures that popped up. We had a lot of supernatural elements. So it
What
did
about the effects
sort of-
guy that gets lit on fire?
Exactly. So we've had a lot of that stuff throughout the film. So it wasn't too far out of the hemisphere, but that doesn't mean I necessarily liked the ending. It's one of those endings where it reminds me of Invitation, where this small little movie that you've been watching ends up affecting the whole world right at the end, right? Same as The Invitation, if you haven't seen that, right? And there's a lot of horrors that do this as well. I don't mind that concept, but I just can't quite put my finger on it, really. But something was missing. It could just be the fact that it was, we were an hour and 20 down. Things were wrapping up. I wanted to see where it was going, and it didn't quite go. But then again, if it went with a happy ending, and she gets free from the demon, like a Conjuring or another film where it's a bit more of a happy ending and everything's hunky dory, would that have left a sour taste in our mouths? Maybe as well. I don't know. Maybe I just.
It's tough to wrap this up.
It's tough.
Yeah,
It's tough.
We are sitting here and we are kind of nitpicking to a point because we
are.
don't have much else to present. I completely agree with you because it does get quite silly. Though, fans of the horror genre and gore whores are kind of looking for that thing.
Exactly.
And in some respect, because the live stream does end up with over 17 million viewers and we see these murders going on everywhere in the world, it does kind of help lead into this universe. And it does get you thinking, okay, what happens next? And you asked Damien that. Go back and listen to the interview again, listeners. You've said to Damien, so what's next? What happens after this ending? So it's a different kind of take. It feels like our first mini-sode, The Rental, where that story, that arc kind of wraps up. And it's not the best third act ending. Neither is it here, but it is ambitious. They do something different. And we've reviewed plenty of those movies where they don't do anything different. So we're not complaining. It just wasn't the best thing for us.
The thing is, endings are sometimes just what the movie hinges on, unfortunately, in a lot of circumstances. And they're so hard to write endings. Yeah, it's such a hard thing to wrap up a movie. It really is. And to wrap it up in a neat little bow where everything makes sense. And I'll harken back to a director you might have heard of, who, one of the reasons why I love him, Mr. CN, you know who I'm talking about. One of the reasons I love
Never heard of him.
is because he wraps up all his movies with such a tight bow, such class, where everything comes together. I don't know how he does it. And it's the same for you. You could say it's the same for Lynch as well.
110%.
Exactly.
Even those movies that he leaves you hanging with little to no answers, you still feel like you've been on a journey and it has reached a natural conclusion. Despite Mulholland Drive leaving you totally stunned, you get to the end of that and you've understood the arc. You get what you get and you felt what you should have gone through. Whereas here, the feeling just isn't quite there. However, the next project from Damien LeVeck, who knows? Are we going to get there?
Do you reckon he's going to blow up that creature, that porcupine creature he was talking about?
He said Gremlins 2 has some of the best practical effects and probably the best creature feature out there. Plenty of them get blown up. He's hoping it happens.
We don't see enough creature features, so I'm actually quite excited for it. But yeah, look, to be honest, guys, this movie is a really tough one for us to review.
It's constrained. because it's a B grade horror. It knows it's a B grade horror. It's a very self-aware B grade horror. It embellishes in that, and it knows its audience, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a 9 or a 10 or a 10 out of 10 movie. Dan, I know you love to...
It was never striving for that, let's be honest.
That's exactly right. For that. And Dan, you've mentioned here on the podcast with your rating system, and this will blend into where we're heading into our next segment. With your rating system, you've said that you'll look at a movie and you'll rate it as you'll give it a score based on the strength of that film, and that's not comparatively speaking. Where I'm of the opposite. If I'm sitting on the fence somewhere and I think, geez, was this a 2 out of 10? Was it a 3 out of 10? Was it a 5? Was it a 6? I will think to other films I've had around that similar score. And if I believe the experience watching this, or I like certain aspects better, that will kind of help me grade the one I'm reviewing at that time. You're a little bit different. This on the horror scale and on the scale of movies that a gore whore would find on Shudder, you could probably have this at like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. But compare this to other films we reviewed here at the podcast, it may not get as high.
No, and that's unfortunately the horror genre is a little bit like that, isn't it?
And it is. And you know what? It's less a negative and more just an observation, because that just so happens to be the nature of the beast. There's a play on words for you. With the horror genre, that's why they might not be recognized at the Academy. What were you going to say?
Why have I never given a horror a 10 out of 10? What is holding this genre back?
You haven't watched enough classic horrors. I'm just going to put that out there.
No, I have, Jackson. I really have. And have you given a horror a 10 out of 10?
I can't think off the top of my head. You could argue that some of David Lynch's films could be horror movies.
But,
it's such a sadness.
I thought back and I'd never given a horror a 10 out of 10. I'm thinking, why is it? What is holding this genre back? Is it the tropes? Is it just a storyline? And the closest I got, I mentioned it a couple episodes ago, The Haunting of Hill House really had a great story. It really, really did. And I think that's just the one thing that we're missing in horrors, just a deep, immersive story that deals with real life themes and not just the horror elements at play and the exorcism and the jump scares.
Yes.
It's more than that. So, yeah, I guess that's why. But I'd love to break out and eventually, it sounds trivial, but just give a horror a 10 out of 10 and just really, really love one.
Could you go back and watch some of Jennifer Kent's work on a rewatch and maybe consider higher marks? I can't speak from experience because, please don't shoot me, listeners, I haven't seen films like The Babadook, but from what I'm told by you and from what I've read everywhere else, plus our listeners out there have mentioned it to me, some of those could be considered quite, superb movies, I suppose. There's also some other seminal films out there. You look at a movie like the original Halloween, could go for like a 10 out of 10 just because of its influence.
Would you call Shining a horror?
Absolutely.
That'd probably be the closest I would get.
There you go.
Even then, I still wouldn't give it I wouldn't give The Shining a 10. So,
okay.
Just personally, but I know a lot of our listeners would. So
I think you could have a few people busting through your door behind you there with an axe.
Maybe. Anyway, I better shut up before all these horror fans kill me. Jackson.
You don't want to be shot.
You know what it's time for.
Jackson's ratings.
IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, audience score, and Letterboxd.
So Metacritic went by the wayside for last week's minisode, #alive. Listeners, if you haven't checked out that South Korean Netflix zombie thriller, say that 5 times fast, well, listen to our minisode. It's a heck of a lot of fun. But I'm bringing in a new rating for this week. Dan Allen Movies. I found Real Scary. You ever heard of these guys?
No.
So, it's a horror movie rating system. Check it out. There's plenty of classics on there, like The Shining. And we got a few categories to chat about when it comes to the cleansing hour. Here we go. Real Scary gave it a 4 for its goriness, a 5 for its disturbing content, and an 8 for being suspenseful. So quite a tense picture. Just something different. Bit of sprinkle in something else. A interesting flavor for our listeners. My God, I really am dying here. Please help me. IMDb has The Cleansing Hour at 5.9 out of 10 from 2,277 user ratings. We want to see that user rating go up. Come on, listeners. Check it out. Rotten Tomatoes, at current time of writing, on the tomato meter, 78% of critics have given it a positive review. 18 critic reviews collated so far, average rating of 5.70 out of 10. 78% of critics positive review, but a 5.70 out of 10. That's interesting. I guess there's a few people out there that felt that this B-grade horror was fun enough, but just not a perfect film. Audience score, 76% of audiences on Rotten Tomatoes have given this a score of 3.5 out of 5 or higher. In fact, it's got an average rating right now of 3.7 out of 5 from 25 user ratings. Only 25. Get out there, rate it, people. Check out The Cleansing Hour because it is fun. Finally, Letterboxd are back. They are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. They might not sponsor us, but we'll still keep plugging them. 3 out of 5, 3.0 from 2,436 member ratings. It's been watched by 2,829 members and liked by 614 of them. Dan, what are your thoughts on some of these scores?
So what are they? 5s and 6s?
They're 5s and 6s.
Yeah, that's...
Although audiences typically have this a little bit higher.
See, I expect to see that on every single horror, pretty much. That's just the default, what people go to for some reason, and without even thinking sometimes. So, you know, I'm not surprised, and, you know, spoilers, I'm sitting around a similar score as well, and I think you are as well for this one. But you can't underestimate that this horror film is very, very ambitious. And that is one thing that you and me absolutely love to see, because there are so many Hollywood remakes now, so many Marvel films, and, you know, not to go off the sentiment that Martin Scorsese said about Marvel films. I don't agree with him there. I think they are. I do like the superhero genre. Well, you know,
who doesn't when they're pulling in billions at the box office?
But I do understand where he's coming from. Where these Marvel films, half of them don't hit for me personally. I think of Ant-Man. I didn't like. You know, Thor, the first two. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. What I'm getting, the point I'm getting at is we like the ambition here. We like that it's taking the genre to places. You know, some places it's been before.
You wouldn't normally go. All right.
Yeah,
like
listen,
it's not like it's a fuck you. It's January movie. Like what do we have this year before
it's
COVID? We had
not.
we had the Grudge. We had Fantasy Island.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
this is
what
miles
were those?
ahead, and they got a 20 times budget. Just remember that. This is what I'm saying. He's obviously a talented filmmaker if he can make a film that's extremely better than them.
Plus directing, producing, writing, editing it.
Hats off to him, really. Really. Directing, editing, producing, and writing. That's a feat in any amount of budget. So, look, heading into our final ratings, Jackson, The Cleansing Hour for me is going to get a 6 out of 10.
Wow.
And it was sitting at a 5. I went to 6 purely because of what I just said, and the fact that I look back at an hour and a half and it flew by. There was some funny moments, and you know, if you and me were sitting next to each other, we probably would have enjoyed it even more.
Dan,
yeah.
You know what? I'm going to join you on this train. I had this at a 5 out of 10 as well, because it really does show its seams. However, it was fun. We're happy with where it went. We had a laugh. It was pretty gross. Stuff it. 6 out of 10, Deadly Devils Databases. Go check it out. It's so ambitious, you can't help but love it.
Beautiful, Jackson. So that's going to come in at 12 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 3 out of 5 from us. We do recommend it to we strongly recommend it to our horror fans out there, and for our general listeners, you can make your own mind up about this one. But there's so much on offer on Shudder, Jackson, and we will continue to watch plenty of movies to come on that service. And he mentioned one as well that we have to check out because he was raving about it, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Listeners, go check it out. It's Daniel Isn't Real, starring Patrick Schwarzenegger. And I believe it's produced by Elijah Wood. We touched on some of his produced films like Mandy.
He's a real producer now, isn't he? Hey?
A real producer now. So I'm kind of excited to see Daniel Isn't Real. I don't know about you. Could be a mini for next week or the week after. Who knows?
Sounds good. Jackson, I'm desperate to hear how the Inferno went. So you watched, for anyone who doesn't know.
Hold up.
Oh, okay.
Hold up. Give some context, all right? This is week 4, the final part. The Halloween Revenge Tour, Dan's Inferno. Call it the final chapter. Dream Warriors, apply whatever episode 4 and New Hope even.
Didn't you say the comeback tour?
It could be the comeback tour. It might be when we get stuck into the movie.
What did you say last week? It was Dan's Inferno, the Revenge Tour or something. Give me the full title. I love it when you say it.
Dan's Inferno, the Halloween Revenge Tour.
Oh, it's music to my ears, hey? Absolutely love it.
I'd use another S word, but I'm just not confident that you can get the cue right this time. So, this is the last movie.
I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench.
Hold on. I've really got to change the button on that sting because it looks too much like the Interstellar one. Anyway, go ahead, Jackson. DJ Dan's on fire.
Dan laid down the gauntlet for our listeners who aren't aware. It might be your first time tuning in. I'm so sorry you've had to endure so much BS, but get used to it. Week 1 was The Human Centipede, Part 2.
Oh,
final
God.
Full sequence. I can't even get the movie right. It feels like it was a millennium ago. You know, I've just about lost that many years having watched all these films. That came in at a 2 out of 10. Week 2 was Cats. That was a 1 out of 10. Week 3 was The Last Airbender, another 2 out of 10. And here, the final part. If I could sit through this film, I've got the movie challenge back. And what a way to end Spooktober. What else could it be? But maybe the worst big budget blockbuster blunder bomb in the Transformers franchise. It's Transformers 5. It's Michael Bay's last ever feature for Hasbro. Transformers: The Last Night. Why did you recommend? In fact, I can't even use the word recommend. Why did you set this film as the last week?
I just pictured you watching this 2.5 hour shit show. It just made me smile. It really did. I could just picture your face going, this is so freaking bad. And it just made me smile. It really did. I'm sorry, Jackson.
Think back to when we covered The Last Airbender. I believe you might have been... you were introducing The Last Airbender. That was way back when on our Trial of the Chicago 7 episode. And you had a slip of the tongue, which I know, right? Dan would never mess something up. He said it's 143 minutes long. Now, I was quick to correct him. I said, Dan, don't tell me it's 143 minutes long. It's actually 1 hour and 43 minutes long. I said, there's no way I'm watching 2.5 hours for the Halloween Revenge Tour. Sure enough, here it is, 150 minutes, Transformers: The Last Night.
150, is it? Yeah,
150. Wow. And I couldn't tell you anything that was going on or that happened for at least 2 hours of that. I tell you what, this was almost as taxing as Cats. It was so close to being on that boring and unpleasant tier. And maybe the first 15 minutes was actually worse than the first 15 minutes of Cats because I was so dizzy, had no clue what was going on. In fact, I don't know anyone who could have watched the last 4 films back to back to back to back could have explained this plot because it was so wild. There's no characters. No one goes through any arc. Altogether, it's just a complete shit show.
What about Marky Wahlberg? What did he get up to?
Marky Mark, I don't even really know. It feels like we're seeing a character who went through his arc about 3 films ago. when in reality, he only showed up in the series for number 4. But he had so little to do. This female actress, and I'm so sorry I've forgotten her name, Laura Haddock, who you might not recognize from playing Star-Lord's mum in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Geez, I really had to pull a trivia there. She's given next to nothing to work with. She's meant to be a strong female protagonist. She's got nothing. Sir Anthony Hopkins is almost joining Dame Judi Dench in the stenches of this podcast of older UK actors, elderly UK actors who can't seem to do anything
He's
right.
not that bad.
But
Come on.
you know what? In his defense, despite being nominated for a Razzie for Worst Supporting Actor for this movie, he was actually the most fun part. He might have been reading his lines off cue cards just out of the shot of camera, you know, a la Marlon Brando. But the half an hour that he shows up for, which is a straight Indiana Jones ripoff, at least that was fun.
Oh, man,
and at
that's
least
funny.
I could digest and work out what was going on. Because I tell you what, this first 15, 20 minutes is challenging. And the word dizzying really sums it up best. I don't know what else to say. I've got to mention this. The aspect ratio changes. I sent you a message, Dan. In one conversation sequence, which should have been a shot, reverse shot with a third character there. So I guess a shot, reverse shot, reverse shot. Each character spoke in their own aspect ratio. What was the point of this? Like, why?
I want to know, Jackson, did you sit through this in one sitting?
This is the first movie I'm reviewing here for the podcast that I had to return on day 2 to finish. I'm sorry, but 2.5 hours is just too fucking long.
So how much did you watch on the first sitting?
I was an hour and 45 minutes I got through on the first sitting, and the second sitting was that last 45. I'm just going to spoil it. So when we have Marky Mark, I think maybe Bumblebee, and we have Laura Haddock's character Vivian, I've already forgotten her name. After they take the submarine, they go to Atlantis, I don't even really know, and they get a sword. I can't quite remember. I think that was the point where I had to stop it. And you know what? It had run out of steam about half an hour before that. Pretty much from the moment Anthony Hopkins leaves, I was like, okay, are we going to wrap things up? No, there's still at least an hour to go. And it didn't need to be so long. Plus, I got to make a point here. Who came up with the design of the Transformers in this franchise? It is some of the ugliest shit I've ever seen. I remember the first one coming out and thinking, geez, these really don't look good. And over 10 years later, they still look like shit.
What do you think of the action scenes dragging on?
Absolutely. And it wasn't any fun. I didn't feel any of it. I felt nothing. And it wasn't even interesting. I'm so glad that all these visual effects artists and CGI people out there, of which there's a $260 million production budget, I'm glad that they're working and they've clearly put some time and effort and energy into it. But I'm sorry, it's all for naught because it's so visually and audibly loud that everything just gets droned out.
Well, so what's your final rating?
I'm torn. I'm really torn because there was a really fun half an hour here. And you know what? My notes that I originally recorded, I think I'm going to do just like we've done for the cleansing hour. I believe I'm going to change this. Dan Allen Movies, my final rating for Transformers The Last Night, the last movie, thank God it is, of the Halloween Revenge Tour, the movie challenge. It's coming back, is coming in at 2 out of 10 dizzying aspect ratio changes. I had it at a 3, but upon reflecting, it's going back in the bin.
Yeah, I had it at a 3 myself. As my
1.5 seems too generous. And you've now given me 4 movies for Spooktober. None of them have gotten above a 2.
So what? 2, 2, 2, and 1. Is that
correct? Cats came in at number 1. So that is going to be my measuring stick. Artemis Fowl and Cats is truly below the bottom of the barrel.
And who's the one actress in both? Judi Dench, the poor thing.
Whenever we get to back to the Bond series and the Daniel Craig's Goldeneye, Tomorrow Never Dies, where she plays M, I'm going to be so glad.
Did Bond get delayed from Christmas?
Yeah, it's not out till 2021.
Oh, no. Are you serious?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what have we got to look forward to this year?
Well, you might have heard of this, but David Fincher has a new movie coming out.
Okay, yeah, we've got Mank. We've got Wonder Woman. There's another.
Isn't
film,
Wonder Woman delayed?
Jackson? There's another film that you hearing what I'm thinking.
I'm not picking up what you're putting down,
let me.
I want to touch on the Bond series for just a moment. We said at the top of the episode, you've already butchered a cue that we're going to bring back. Dan, have I got the movie challenge back?
Yeah, you have. I just derail this show, don't I? I
You really do.
I'm so
Just
sorry.
bear with me. I am the star.
Look, you've brought the movie challenge back, Jackson. You have defeated the Inferno for this year, but don't think it's going to be over just yet. The Inferno will be back. Okay, so don't get complacent. That's all I'll say. All right. So in my eyes, seeing as you went through the Inferno, you went through 4 films. Now you get 4 films for me to recommend, and we'll go through. But if those 4 films aren't doing it for me, then we'll have to have a word in a month's time. But anyway, what are we doing this week? Sean Connery. So
We're celebrating the life and times of Sir Sean Connery.
There's a movie by Sir Kenneth Branagh. You may have heard of him.
Never.
And he made a remake of this film. It's The Murder on the Orient Express. Okay? You're going back to 1974 to watch Sean Connery and co. And you're going to have a ball, I think. We'll see.
How exciting. I can't wait to check out 1974's Murder on the Orient Express. It couldn't have been the first adaptation of that film, but starring Sean Connery, we will allow it. Movies.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's the first, but I do know that Ingrid Burnham won an Oscar for her supporting role.
Ooh, we can expect some good work. You asked for the movie challenge to return. You wanted to check out a James Bond movie. Now, I have got a film here starring Sean Connery. It is from the UK. It is from the 80s. It didn't make a great deal of money here at the box office. Dan, with this film, action, adventure, fantasy, cult movie, it spawned several film sequels and even a TV series. Heaps of memorabilia, video games, the works. There can only be one. You're watching Highlander.
Oh, Jackson. Oh, no.
Prepare yourself for Sean Connery as Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, an Egyptian, playing a Spaniard, played by a Scottishman.
So it's Tropic Thunder 1.
Maybe 0.5.
0.5, yeah. All right. Highlander.
Hasn't this episode been a journey? Highlander, Murder on the Orient Express. The gauntlet has been thrown down, but the movie challenge is back, and I hope we've got something decent to follow it up.
Hey, I've heard good things, so I don't know if you've looked after me necessarily, but we'll find out.
Listeners, let us know. DM at We Watch This Podcast, DM at Dan Allen Movies, DM at Marshall on Film followed by an _. Let him know your thoughts on Highlander. Before we wrap things up, who do we have to thank for this week's episode?
We have to thank our amazing sponsor, Shudder.
Listeners, thank you so much for sticking out. Another stellar, excellent, amazing episode of the We Watch This Movie podcast, number 38, as we've covered The Cleansing Hour. You can find The Cleansing Hour on Shudder. It's the premier streaming service for horror, thriller, and supernatural content. You heard it from Damien LeVeck. Shudder, in COVID, in quarantine, has now amassed over 1 million streamers. Wow, that's a lot of streamers. It's the Netflix for horror. Coming up in their November schedule, I want to recommend you check out Pedro Almodovar. I've butchered that name, but we're going to keep moving. His movie, The Skin I Live In. It's a heck of a lot of fun. It's a horror movie. You're going to love it. Antonio Banderas is wonderful. I also want you to check out the Scanner series, Scanners and Scanners 2. Scanners, directed by David Cronenberg, is a true sci-fi horror, a cult classic. You're going to enjoy it. With Shudder, Shudder.com, WWT, 30-day free trial, iPhone, iPad, Apple TV. Go check out their original content. We want you to take advantage of this 30-day free trial. Promo code WWT. It's down the bottom of your screen, in your ear holes. Go take advantage of Shudder.
This is the moment I've been waiting for 48 weeks. That's a made-up number of weeks, but it's been a long freaking time. Jackson, movie theaters have opened. As of tomorrow, they're opening, I should say. And there's a film we have been desperate to see. This might be my all-time most anticipated film. Just because of the situation that we were in, where we thought we were going to see it, we didn't. We thought we were going to see it, we got stripped back again because of lockdown and COVID. Jackson, we are going to see
The New Mutants!
No, we are going to see
The Personal History of David Copperfield?
No.
We did see that, but we lost the episode.
Christopher Nolan's...
Inception, back on the big screen.
Not quite. Christopher Nolan's espionage sci-fi thriller action starring Kenneth Branagh, Denzel Washington's son. Oh God, I'm done. And
Goodness
Robert,
me, you really,
Robert
you
Pattinson.
really are milking this, aren't you?
Robert Pattinson. It's
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
It's fucking Tenet, and I can't wait. Next episode, our review of Tenet, it's going to be a whopping 7-hour long episode. Get ready. Jackson, with that all being said, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to look.
Please.
Oh, God.
This has been one of the
What
funniest.
a shit! This episode. This episode will go down as
Easily
one of the worst.
No fault of Damien, no fault of the Cleansing Hour, all fault of Dan Allen Movies. If you have enjoyed the show, we'd love for you to follow us at We Watch This Podcast. You'll find us on Facebook, you'll find us on Instagram, you'll find us on TikTok, you'll find us on Twitter, and of course, you'll find us on your favorite podcasting platform. While you're there, hit follow, hit subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars. It would mean the world to us. Maybe you could even drop in a movie you'd like us to cover in that 5-star rating. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Check out his work at Dan Allen Movies on the aforementioned platforms. My work at Marshall on Film, followed by a underscore on the aforementioned platforms. While you're there, give a listen to the PS5 Central podcast. It's a big week in the world of gaming, and I know our editor would definitely appreciate it. With that, next week's episode, he's already let the cat out of the bag. The script has been ruined. We're on to Tenet.